really is a reflection of a shifting orientation of the ruling bloc, their approach to the structure of the economy, toward investment. We could talk about a new type of ruling class, a new economic elite.
I think it was redefining what the meaning of the state was and what its purposes were. I think one way of understanding neoliberalism is to look at it as sort of a very concrete break from sort of Keynesian types of policies. So in the past, the state was really legitimated in very fundamental ways in terms of endorsing certain forms of solidarity, in terms of recognizing collective rights to bargain, that there was a place for workers to have voice, even if it is a minority voice within those structures of power. But neoliberalism really was sort of a fundamental break from that. And they had partial achievements in terms of rolling back a lot of the Keynesian state. Some of it remained embedded, because these are institutional structures, so they're hard to, once they're institutionalized, to reverse. And the same thing happened with their reforms as they became embedded into the state. So in fact, they're very hard to sort of unembed. Part of the neoliberal critique of the state was that the state was big, but the state was not powerful because the state was too fractured. It couldn't accomplish its goal. It was kind of like a gentle giant that was fumbling around, and the idea was to sort of muscularize the state, redefine its goals.
What the machinery in the state does is actually beginning to change. It's actually about strengthening the state. It's about the centralization of power, the aggrandizement of power, but to accomplish different objectives.
The repressive functions become more prominent. The state has to become more intrusive into society in terms of locking up criminals, identifying criminals, criminalizing sections of the population. You've got, of course, the war state.
If you want an example where the ruling bloc everywhere very rapidly rediscovered the power of the state, look at the credit crisis, where hundreds of billions of dollars have been marshaled to, in effect, recreate a welfare state for capital.
Capital has an awful lot of resources. They invested in think tanks at a time when the left was not doing any of this. With Harris, with the Thatchers, you've got the ideologues, if you will, of neoliberalism. They changed how the broad swath of society and the opinion leaders thought about the state. They've spent 20 years of using things like the Fraser Institute to get their ideas circulated in the public. So a lot of the common sense that has been redefined has been in terms of the right, so that when debates occur within public, they can strike chords when they talk about the family that play into their agenda.
You do it by, and I like to borrow a quote from Utah Phillips, the IWW folk singer. You need to ensure that in the popular mind, the blame pattern goes down, not up. And by making the welfare state, the institutions of the welfare state, the beneficiaries of the welfare state, i.e. the trade unions, the public sector workers, the problem, you delegitimate the state and build a new political coalition of the ruling bloc, the economic elite, and a large number of middle-income, lower middle-income people who come to identify the troubles they confront in their life with, in fact, the welfare state. In public opinion, the core elements of what we can call the welfare state remain very popular. That's running against the politics of decline, erosion, limiting all of that.
Public health care remains very popular. You've got other things that are more sort of universally enjoyed in terms of the welfare state.
The delegitimation politically in public opinion is very uneven.
You know, where you get the real erosion is things like social welfare. That were two particular types of vulnerable populations. The whole third way is tried to recapture what's kind of worked in neoliberalism, what hasn't kind of worked, and sort of ran with that in terms of trying to create a more sustainable, I guess, reformed neoliberal agenda, we might call it.
We grew up, and our parents grew up, when the Social Democratic left in Ontario, at a minimum, was influential. Maybe not government, but influential. They were to be dealt with. You know, the re-emergence of a Liberal Labour coalition, which is a direct product of the failure of the NDP.
The defeat, and what many would have seen as the betrayal of the NDP, of course, really marginalized the party. The NDP, federally, provincially, locally, really doesn't have any sort of sense of class. Oriented class-centered class analysis became very much abandoned.
Oh, this issue of what do you do with the neoliberal social democratic left, the remnant of it, is a critical part of the problem.
It's showing some of its vulnerabilities in the potential of a significant economic downturn, both in the States but also more globally. Hard-edged neoliberal reforms really do not offer people very much in a downturn when the promise of consumerism goes out the door, and you've got increasing numbers of very vulnerable people. And when they begin to turn to the state and they say, okay, well, in the past we had our unemployment insurance, we had these other kinds of protections. Well, I'm no longer covered. This is a significant change, and it can change attitudes very quickly. Politicians and other sort of spokespeople for neoliberal ideas will say, well, no, there is no alternative, the old Thatcher one. Well, I mean, that's not true. I think there are alternatives. Some of them will have costs, and they will require struggle.
Issues which broad numbers of people confront in their daily lives are not being dealt with by anybody or anything.
The right has a fairly coherent agenda, and the left has been very fractured. And they might be able to win on this point or that point, but they've had a much harder time since the demise of Keynesianism of articulating a strategy and an agenda and a program that makes sense in a common sense Gramscian kind of way to the general public. And I think that is a very significant challenge. But I think we need to invest in ideas. We need to invest in circulating those ideas, and not just within sort of a small group of intellectual circles, but more broadly.
Where we can begin is in a beginning to build a network left as a presupposition to a structured left.